All right, Brodie, thanks for joining me on Renna's Corner Conversations. Um, this is a really unique conversation, I think,
Yep.
because your son and my daughter have the same rare genetic disorder, Pitt
Yep.
Hopkins syndrome. And I don't really get a lot of perspective from the dad's side. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, Renna's dad is a part of our life and he shares a ton of things too. But
Yeah.
um, I feel like it's different when you're not married.
Mm.
It's easier to maybe hear somebody else's perspective. So I would love to kind of get your perspective on being a dad to a
Yeah.
child that has a rare genetic disorder and kind of how you balance it all. Maybe if you're ready to
Yeah.
be vulnerable, how you're really feeling. I don't know
Mm.
how much you typically share and what you feel comfortable with. So we're gonna kind of open it up, let you
Yep.
introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit about the journey so far, and we can kind of just go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you in advance, Brenda, for this free counseling session. Um, I'm an open book. I'm happy to share. It's so helpful to talk about. We've had, yeah, our journey. So my wife Katie and I have for sure been on a roller coaster since Louie was born. So our son Louie, his name is Louie. Louie is 2.5 now. And we got his diagnosis pretty early, it sounds like, compared to a lot of
Mm.
families. How old was Lou? Lou was like 8 or 9 months old
Yeah, that's
when we got
early.
his diagnosis. I think it was April of 2024 because he was born in June of 23. Um, and gosh, like as, it's so challenging, and God bless all the families, Brenda, that go through this for years without a diagnosis.
My word, I know.
I don't understand it. Even 10 months of it was really challenging to not know what's going on. We've got an older son, Henry, who is healthy and neurotypical. He's 5.5, so he's about 3 years older than Louis. We're 2.5 years older. So we also, we had another son that we're trying to love and take care of in the midst of this. But so Louis is born in, and I'll just give you the whole spiel of the early life crisis that I had in the midst of all this.
Yeah.
Louis was born, something's going on. I experienced some trauma right off the bat because I was alone with Louis in the NICU when he was like desatting. My wife Katie was still back in the hospital room. At that point, we know something's going on, but it's like, yeah, whatever. He's a newborn, like it'll probably be fine. But he's like, desatting, oxygen's dropping. I'm alone with him in the NICU, and I'm like having to go get the nurses because the nurses like aren't coming to us. And we had a good experience overall in the NICU, but for the first few minutes, like literally the first few minutes, I was like having to go get the nurses and be like, he's he's desatting. Like I didn't know the term then. But the things you learn when you become a medical parent. So anyway, I like experienced some trauma right off the bat of like going through this super scary thing of like not knowing what's going on um, with Louis when he was first born. But still at that point, like not at all thinking that we were going to have a child with a rare genetic syndrome. But we were in the NICU with him ultimately about 2 weeks. Um, we lived there. We didn't go home at all. We were only 15 minutes from our house, which is great, which is good. But we didn't go home. Like even our younger son, he was what did I say 2.5 at the time, so he was probably going through some trauma because we were like at the hospital. We went home to see him, but we didn't go
Yeah.
home to like spend the night. Like we spent the night, both of us, at the hospital every night for about 2 weeks, which is I know compared to some other families that's not even that long, but for us it felt like a very long time. So the longer we get Louis home and the longer we have him home, like we just continue to see like things aren't right. He was not a very happy baby. Um, like crying a lot. We didn't know what was going on. Um, gosh, in the midst of all this, Brenda, I get laid off from my job.
Mm.
When Louis is probably 3 months old. When was that? That was like October. Yeah, he was about 3 months old, and that was a job that, I had left this career that I had before that. I was a TV news reporter and anchor for like 10 years And like I left that career because schedule and stuff.
Mm,
I left it to take this job, and then I got laid off from this job. And Katie doesn't have a job because she's staying home with Louie and with our other son Henry. So we're like, okay, still going through these major health challenges with Louie because he's 3 months old, and by that point we're definitely like something's going on here. Like he may have like cerebral palsy or something because Louis had a brain bleed at birth.
mm,
But that's kind of what we were thinking. Like maybe he has cerebral palsy.
yeah,
Then I get laid off from my job, and we have no other source of income. So we're just like, man, was already kind of going through this like early life crisis, like switching careers from a career that I loved, but then like decided to do something to make a little more money to let Katie stay home, and then going through everything with Louis, then get laid off. Well, ended up getting a great job pretty quickly after that. Got fired from that job uh, after 3 months. Never been fired from a job, never had issues in the workplace really.
mm,
Got fired from that job after 3 months, and we're just like, God, what are you doing? So my wife and I are followers of Jesus. When we can get into that, all the reasons that we trust in Him through this, but we're like, God, what's happening? Like, we were smooth sailing through life
right?
before all this. Like I was like the lead anchor at a TV station, and then I like switched careers and it was okay, but like had a, you know, healthy, normal, older son. Like life was good. And then like all these super challenges with Louis, get fired 2 times in a row. Like, what's happening? What is happening? It was a storm for sure. So that's when I ended up starting my own business. I own a video marketing firm. Ultimately, though, we decided at that point, like we were living in Charleston, South Carolina. We decided, about a year and a half later to jump forward that we wanted to be closer to family. So we sold our house, we moved to Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains to be next to my wife's parents, to get their help. And it's been very helpful. We've been here for just over a year. But to make a short story long, just the journey of parenthood and life of a child with a rare, severe genetic syndrome, also having career transitions and life transitions and leaving a place we've lived for 10 years, leaving our church, leaving family, like so many things, Brenda, were just like happening at the same time. Major life changes.
Oh yeah.
Any one of those things
Right? I'm
would
like, I
would
feel
have been
like I
enough.
have like goosebumps, which is a really weird thing, but like, wow, that is a
Mhm.
lot because I've gone through lots of things,
Yeah.
but nothing all at the same time. Some of it, like,
Yeah.
and I won't get into some of those things, but that is a lot. That is huge. And one thing I
Yeah.
was thinking of when you were sharing is one thing kind of to my benefit is Ren is my only child.
Yeah.
So I had nothing to compare her to at all. And she
Yeah.
was born right before the world shut down. So I just thought she was delayed. I thought
Mhm.
it was kind of normal that an
Mhm.
18-month-old couldn't
Yeah.
roll over or sit up. Like I had
Yeah.
no idea.
And Renna's how old now?
She's gonna be 6 on February 29th.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, and we got her diagnosis when she was 2.5, which I guess would have been 22, summer of
Yep.
22. So yeah, a little bit different because Renna was typical baby, typical
Yeah.
pregnancy, everything was
Yeah.
typical. The only thing is they kept saying her head's measuring small.
Yeah.
But
Same
then,
for Louis.
yeah, and then she wasn't gaining weight, so we had feeding issues. And now looking back, we know it's because of the low tone.
Yep.
But we were clueless. Like we had
Hmm.
no idea what was going on.
Hmm.
So I feel like there's good and bad at finding out early on versus later.
Yeah.
I know for me, the finding out later is I, and I think we all do this.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you did it too with Louie. Like you just picture this life and how your kid's going to be and how your kid's going to grow up. And I'm very much like a doer.
Yeah.
And That actually gets me in trouble sometimes because I don't always wait to listen to what God has for me. I'm like, let's
Yeah.
do, let's do.
Yeah.
Um, but I was just doing all the
I've
therapy,
never done that. I've never done that.
right? I know it's hard for us all, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I just kept doing and kept thinking she'll be fine. She's just delayed. The more therapies, the more we do, the better she'll be. And I do believe that those therapies have helped her tremendously. But
Mhm.
when we got the diagnosis, I was a mess because I realized I couldn't fix this, and it wasn't something that she would grow out of. Like it wasn't just delays. And so I
Yeah.
feel like at that point, that's kind of where my life flipped upside down.
Yeah.
I quit the job that I had, kind of
Mhm.
similar to you. I was
Mhm.
a travel agent working for a small Christian travel agency remotely from home. I loved it. I felt like
Mhm.
it was finally
Yeah.
the perfect fit when it comes to a job. Like it was amazing. And I ended up taking maternity leave for 6 months and then going back because it was travel. Like the world had shut down. So we weren't sending missionaries anywhere. Families
Yeah.
weren't adopting from different
Oh,
countries anymore. And so I went back after 6 months instead of like three. I stayed for a
yeah.
year, but it just
Mhm.
became more challenging. And at that time, I didn't even know about Renna's genetic disorder. I was blaming myself for all of her delays, like, oh, if I wasn't
It's a real
working as
thing.
much.
It's a real
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, you like blame yourself. And then, like,
Yeah.
you find out genetic, like, oh my word, was I carrier? Did I do something wrong? Like,
Also a real thing. Like,
yeah.
yes.
And so I reached a point where I really think God was like, all right, I'm going to kick you out of that job because I know you're not going to leave it.
Yeah.
But I told my husband, I was like, I just feel that I need to leave something that I love for someone that I love even more. And
Mhm.
so it kind of took that leap of faith. I stayed home with Renna. Um, and I basically drove her to therapies all day, every day.
Yep.
Appointments,
Yep.
therapies. Now she's in kindergarten, so things are a little bit different. And now I can do some of the things I want to do. I have, um, you know, part-time job at my church and part-time job as a para at her school.
Yeah.
So I'm able to actually breathe a little bit now, but it's hard. It's hard when your kids are little like Louie and you have all those things going on. Like I see your posts and Katie's posts and we're in the hospital or we're doing this or we're doing that. And I literally am thinking like, man, okay, stereotypically for a woman, it's a little easier, like I'm a substitute at Renna's school, work at my
Mhm.
church, I could change my schedule,
Yeah.
but it's got to be hard as a man who, as far as I know, men feel kind of valued when they're providing for their family, and
Mhm.
to go through all those job things
Yeah.
and try to be a good husband and a good dad and just
Mhm.
deal with your own personal stuff. That's got to be hard. I don't know if you want to share any more about that. I just want to kind of like intertwine. Say
Yep.
I've had some similar but totally different
Yep.
experiences.
No, that's all good. Thank you for sharing that. And Ren is crushing it, by the way. I love seeing all the videos of her walking and that stuff. That's really encouraging to us.
Yeah.
Louis just started like physical therapy out, like out of the house, like a
Hmm.
much more intense physical therapy, and he's only been a few times. It's already amazing to
Yeah.
see. And there are times like he's standing, and I'm like, hard for me to see that, hard for me to envision this,
Renna wasn't
or
standing at that age.
hard for me to envision Louis ever walking. But then
Hmm.
I see Renna do it, and I'm like, he's gonna walk, man. And I know every case is very different, but every kid's very different. But it's just super encouraging, just so you know.
Yeah.
Um, but to your question, I mean, yeah, as a dad, you know, I mean, similar like going through grief, like you go through grief, and I think if you've never for families that don't go through this, grief isn't just something you go through when someone dies. You're grieving the loss of the life you thought your child was going to have. You're grieving the loss of the life you thought you were going to have as their parent. You thought Louis' older brother was going to have. majorly grieving that.
Hmm.
And you slide up and down on the scales of grief. Sometimes you're better at acceptance. Sometimes you're more angry. Sometimes like you go up and down.
Hmm.
And there are so many things that are triggering. Places you go to. For me, it's like places I've been to that I didn't go to or that I haven't been to like since before Louie was born.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh man, the peace I had in my heart at that season of life, just probably rose-colored glasses. But um, anyway, I think like as a man, like I see even on the Facebook page, the Pitt Hopkins Facebook page, a wonderful resource. We're so thankful for it. It's mostly moms.
Hmm.
And I'm not on there a ton, so there are probably some dads in there that I'm not seeing that who at least who engage, right? There's probably a lot of lurkers. Uh,
Right.
but I don't think there's a whole lot of dads who are super engaging and commenting, and I'm sure there are a few. But case in point is me. I'm actually not on there that much. Um, so I think this is extremely lonely to have a child with a disability and a rare genetic disorder. It's massively lonely. And I don't just mean physically lonely, although it is. It can make it a real challenge to go do stuff and be
Oh
with
yeah,
people. Like that,
for
that's
sure.
true. But more than that, it's just, and you understand this, I know, the loneliness you feel of like no one can get it.
Mm.
That does like other families get it. But the friends you have in your life, your family, like they don't get it and they never fully can.
Hmm.
We've been living with my wife's parents for 14 months while we renovate a house. Um, they do a pretty good job of getting it at this point, but they still can't fully, and that's not their fault
Oh yeah.
because it's not their kid, right? They love their grandchildren very much, and they love Louis so much, but no one can fully get it, and there's a real loneliness to that. And the Facebook group is a great community for helping with that, and I think the moms, I think it's a great resource, but like the dads need to man up and find a way to connect somehow.
Hmm.
Um, because men talk a lot less than women in general, anyways. Um, Men tend to go a lot less deep than women do. I have found being a part of a church helps with that because you a lot of times, you have men's groups or community group if you go to a church. That's very helpful. But I think especially for people who aren't like engaged in that kind of community, men who aren't engaged in that, like I'm going to guess there's very few outlets for them to ever have any kind of real conversation
Yeah.
with anybody, any of the other dads who are dads of kids with disabilities. It's really important for dads to find that community. They've got to have conversations to talk through the grief that I hope that they're self-aware enough to know they're feeling. I'm sure there are a lot of dads who aren't even at that stage to know that that's what they're feeling. I don't know, but trying to do this alone, disability dads who don't have other dads to pour into them, dads that are maybe a little further ahead of them in the process, to say like, hey man, like it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna feel lonely, but like it's gonna be okay. Like that's really important. And I think like dads have to be willing to be intentional about that, or it's not gonna happen. Like relationships don't happen by accident, especially when you're the parent of a child with disabilities. So much of your time and energy is just by necessity given to your child.
Hmm.
So we already know that even if you don't have a kid with a disability, like relationships don't, they just take intentionality.
Oh
But
yeah.
especially when you have this massive commitment to caring for a child with disabilities, like as a dad, you have got to make a plan and you've got to like be real about checking in with other dads, or it's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a long journey anyway. Um, but it's going to be a lot harder and lonelier, and you're going to make a lot more mistakes probably if you're not figuring out other dads to talk to about this. And even if it's not other disability dads, even if it's just other dads, you got to be talking out loud to other
Hmm.
people. Um, I am not talking out loud to any other dads with disabilities. I need to change that. I do have other dads that I talk to. I do have friends that I talk to. Um, but we like I think God made us for community. He made us to exist in community, talking with other people about our wins and our losses. And we take a lot of losses when you've got a kiddo with Pitt Hopkins. But it's also super important to celebrate the wins with them. So I don't know. Yeah, I think my challenge is like dads, like you've got like if any wives or moms are watching this, like tell your husbands or like let's figure out a plan for you to like get with somebody and they can reach out to me. Um, I wish I had more capacity to just like start some kind of group. Maybe that's my action step from this conversation, Brenda. Uh, but yeah, I just think it's super important because we feel so helpless sometimes.
Mhm.
And we have so many fears and worries and anxieties that are in our head that I think when you name them and you define them, uh, it becomes a little less scary, right? And it doesn't take away from how hard things are going to be. It doesn't take the heart away, but it makes it feel a little less nebulous and maybe a little more manageable when you're talking about it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. So, little like background, because it connects to this, is I started going to a group called Celebrate Recovery back in
Hmm.
2013.
Yeah.
Um, I was previously married. I won't get into all the details. It was very toxic, not good at all. And I'd
Hmm.
become super codependent in that relationship, and it was really difficult, and I needed somewhere to get help, somewhere to share.
Hmm.
Because when you're isolated and you keep it all in your head,
Yeah.
you think that everything in there is true,
Hmm.
and it's
Yep.
not.
Yep.
And it could be something simple. It doesn't have to be as
Hmm.
traumatic as
Yeah.
what I had gone through. But I started going to this group, Celebrate Recovery, at my church, and I know it's like a worldwide
Yeah.
ministry. And I would still be active in that group if
Mhm.
Renna didn't go to bed when it starts. Um, but I do remember even when Renna was a baby, everything switched to virtual because of the pandemic, and I was still plugging into our groups, like our women's group, where we could openly share anything that was going on. And I feel like there was so much value in that early on. And then when we got the diagnosis, because I would go weekly and get to share with these women, and everything's confidential. You can't try to fix somebody. You can't give advice, and unless somebody asks you for advice. But like,
Yeah.
it was such a safe place where just speaking out loud
Mm.
brought so much healing, and I
Mhm.
could figure out like, what am I feeling? What
Yep.
is going on? And I remember this was early on. I don't even know if she had a diagnosis, but I'd become a
Mhm.
leader at Celebrate Recovery, and I was sharing my testimony. And so I shared like past, and then I
Mhm.
came up to Renna. And I don't think I fully processed some of the stuff,
Mhm.
because I was talking about how I started to share with you, where I envisioned this life and this world and everything was planned out in my head,
Mhm.
and that is not what it turned out to be at all.
Yeah.
And so I think I cried through the whole end
Yeah.
part of it, and I'm like, I'm sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
But there's so much healing in just sharing
Yep.
and connecting with others. So yeah, that is super important. And I feel like there's different ways that I personally have
Mhm.
worked through some of that. And same
Mhm.
thing, ups and downs with grieving things. But sharing Renna's story
Yeah.
not only helps other family like your
Mhm.
family, but helps
Mhm.
me too, because before I was focusing on like what she couldn't do,
Mhm.
or where we couldn't go, or what experiences we couldn't have. And
Yep.
then I pushed myself to constantly get out and do stuff with her.
Mhm.
If she's going to scream, she's going to scream. It was super
Yep.
uncomfortable, and I was very anxious and thought
Yep.
everybody was judging me. And you just reach a point where you're like, you know what? My child has the same right to be here too. And if you don't like how she's trying to communicate, well, you can leave too.
Yeah.
But it takes a while. Like it
It
takes
does.
so much getting in these uncomfortable situations before you kind of change your perspective. And then like looking at some of the videos that I share,
Hmm.
seeing like, wow, she was communicating and I didn't even realize it. I was getting frustrated because she wouldn't.
Yep.
This is the one example that always pops in my head. We had a little
Yeah.
tiny trampoline. This is our
Hmm.
upgrade.
Right.
But we had a little tiny circular trampoline with the
Hmm.
bar, and she's holding the bar, and that is a huge step. She had never held the bar, but I'm like,
Yeah.
man, she's still not jumping.
Yeah.
And she still can't jump. So I was bouncing her, and
Hmm.
I'm recording us because I'm going to post it and share about how she loves her trampoline. And I can see in the recording,
Hmm.
she's letting go and she's signing more. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my word. And then when I watched it after posting
Hmm.
it, she's like trying to bounce.
Yeah.
I was so stuck in like, man, she's still not bouncing, but she's holding on, so that's great.
Yeah.
So it just kind of changes, I don't know, your perspective starts to change as time goes on.
Hmm.
I mean, still there's times where like okay, here's a good example. Me
Hmm.
substituting as a para in her school. I
Yeah.
was with preschoolers yesterday, and they're all like five-ish. Renna's
Yeah.
gonna be six in like a week. And I'm to the point where I don't get upset because I've accepted Renna and where she's at. But there are times like, wow, this little girl, she is so sweet and she is pulling me to the
Hmm.
next center to do
Yeah.
the next activity.
Yep.
And we were basically playing house in the one center. And, you can't help but think like, wow, like, does Renna want to be playing in this way that I'm playing with this child? Will Renna ever grab my hand and pull me to something? Will Renna ever talk with words? She says random words, but is it just in my
Yeah.
head? Is she actually saying these things? So there's so much ups and downs, but I definitely think it's helped a lot to share her story and be connected. Whatever,
Hmm.
like you said, like it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be another dad with a child with a disability, but like
Yeah.
connect with someone you can be real with.
Hmm.
Like the women in my Celebrate Recovery group, we're all dealing with and all sorts of things. Like a lot of it is like more of like hurts that we're dealing with. Um, but yeah, like that stuff brings anger and sadness and all these things. And if you're holding it in, it's really easy to spew that ugly out on your family and everyone else. And I mean, besides with God's help and
Yeah.
sharing and being vulnerable, like I don't know how people
Hmm.
have any hope when this is heavy, this is exhausting, this is a
Hmm.
lot. And it's not something that you can deal with or heal with or get through like
Hmm.
this.
No.
So
Yeah.
it's rough,
I didn't know I had anger issues
right? Me neither.
until, yeah. And until after Louie was born and we were going through all this and not knowing what was going on. Yeah. I mean, definitely anger issues born out of grief
Hmm.
and fear. Uh, and lots of prayer through that, lots of conversations through that, some professional counseling
Yes,
with
same.
that. Yeah, everyone should get counseling no matter what stage of life you're in. Everyone should get
Yep.
counseling. Um, I'm glad that we're moving away from a stigma about counseling in our culture. Um, yeah, I mean, even now, Brenda, we're kind of at a stage where Louis is like, it's very obvious Louis has a disability when we're out and about,
Hmm.
which it has been for a little while, but not really. I mean, we could pretend for a while, like you wouldn't really notice, even when he was maybe two. Not, and we don't care. We're not trying to hide it. We love Louis and we're proud of him. Like, whatever. We don't care what anybody thinks. But that's another point of transition that we're kind of going through right now is like very obvious that he is disabled, that he has a disorder when we're out and about. We don't care, but like that's a new thing
Hmm.
that, we're getting more stairs when we feed. Louis has a G tube. So he eats primarily through his G tube right now. Um, like people stare at that and they're like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Whenever we do that in public. So, I think we encounter, and so there's that piece of it. There's, other friends who have kids his age that are healthy and neurotypical, and you see their milestones. And it's like you go back down the rabbit hole of grief as you encounter these moments that you weren't anticipating. And you try not to compare your lives to others. You want to have genuine joy
Yeah.
for other people's lives, and try not to be jealous of them. And we love Louis for who he is. That's a lesson God's teaching us through this whole process is like, Louis is the least of these, that Jesus talks about, and he requires our special attention and energy and care. And we love him for who he is. Like, we don't want him or need him to be normal. Are we going to do everything in our power to give him some normalcy, in life? Like, yeah, we're going to take him to therapy. We're going to do everything we can to prevent constipation pain. With kids with Pitt Hopkins have terrible pain from constipation and other GI issues. It's just completely not fair.
Yeah.
In addition to all the other stuff. So, um, yeah, I think God's teaching us that. I think he's teaching me right now that, like, I need to reframe, like the gap between like what I thought our lives was going to be and what our lives are. Like, it's a big gap, of course.
Yeah.
But I think, like, sometimes in my mind, I have to remind myself that, like, our lives are not like a 0 out of 10. And if Louis were neurotypical, there wouldn't be a 10 out of 10. Like, it's
Yeah.
not fair to think that like everything would be perfect and everything's terrible. Like, it's no, like, obviously life is super different than it would be, and we have a lot of major challenges, but we have, so much joy in Louis. Like, often kiddos and people who have Pitt Hopkins are generally very joyous,
Yes.
so long as they're not experiencing pain and discomfort. Um, and we're so thankful for that. Um, like, Louis and probably Renna too. Like, the superpower is their joy and their ability to
Yes.
light up a room, and their ability just to like make really direct eye contact. Um, and Louis charms everybody he meets, and he brings us so much genuine joy. And we're not grading him on a curve when I say that. I don't mean like, joy for a kid with disabilities. No, like, genuine joy.
Oh yeah.
We love him for who he is.
Hmm.
And his older brother Henry is already turning into a little boy who is so empathetic and so kind. And I think God is going to use this and use Louis' story to, make Henry an even kinder, even more empathetic boy than maybe he would have been.
Hmm.
I remember the Pitt Hopkins family conference that we went to, when Louis was like less than a year old. They had a siblings breakout session where siblings. You were there? Were you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we met there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The sibling session, it's always stuck out to me how
Yeah.
powerful it was to see some of the older siblings. Most of them, I think, were like in high school age. Um, how mature they seemed, how well spoken they were, and
Hmm.
how empathetic. And we got a very small snapshot of who they were, but it really seemed like they had genuine empathy and genuine humility and genuine maturity. Um, and I contribute that largely to the sibling they have with Pitt Hopkins, and they said that even
Yeah.
all of them said that like they just, the little immature jokes that kids make, like, yeah, no, like, we don't that's not how we live, right? And there's a price to be paid for that maturity and
Yeah.
that empathy.
There
Uh,
is.
it comes at the cost of, the same things that cause grief.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's a two-edged sword, but I think God is using Louis' disability for his glory, and in a way that is gonna, even through all the hard things, it's gonna make us better disciples of him, and, better lovers of the least of these, and better lovers of people who can give nothing in return.
Yep. I've totally felt that for me too. I'm like, wow, I have changed so much. And view others totally different and more accepting and loving. And look, I think I can't read it backwards, but it says something like advocate, support,
Empower.
empower. And there's another
Yeah.
one that says something about acceptance. And like my goal, we only have a couple more minutes, but my goal has been I just want people to know and love and accept Renna. And the people who get to experience her get to feel that joy that
Mhm.
some people will never experience. Like there is
Yeah.
just something about our kids. But if there's anything else you want to share in the next 60 seconds,
Yeah.
please do.
Now, just dads out there, if you're a dad watching her, you're the wife of a dad, just go find community, talk to someone about this, because you're going to benefit from processing through your trauma and processing through your grief. So be intentional about that. Pay for counseling if you can, because that's going to be helpful. And encourage people who don't have kids with disabilities to be kind and curious and don't just stare, but just smile.
Mhm.
And feel free to ask a question if you see us in public, just smile, and be kind.
Definitely. Yeah. And those husbands, your wives, and your children will benefit from you finding and seeking these things as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And I'm here to help if anybody wants to reach out and they need someone to talk to.
All right. We'll
We'll connect on
share
Facebook.
your socials so people can reach out.
Yeah.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me on.
Thank you.
See ya.